Good morning, everyone. Today is June 3rd, and I decided to make this short video just to bring some stuff in my head out in the open for you guys, stuff that I've discussed and stuff I've commented to a limited extent. So I decided to, why not just share it with everyone what I have in my mind. So let's call it what it is. It was a murder. George Floyd was murdered. He was murdered by an on-duty cop, an on-duty white cop, an African American male who was not resisting arrest. It certainly follows a pattern that has been in play for the last few years here in the United States. So it happened, it has been happening, it will not stop happening till we do a few things. Now, before I get to that, what happened after that? There were protests that were planned. Some of those protests went seamlessly well, like the one a couple of days ago in Frisco, Texas. Very peaceful, very well regulated, very well coordinated, which was led by the mayor of City of Frisco, Jeff Cheney. So very well done, a job well done to mayor and the team of Frisco administrators. Other protests did not end well. There was looting. A police precinct was set on fire. There was mass riots in different cities of the country. That is not how protests are done. There is absolutely no justification for anyone damaging Target, anyone damaging Walgreens, any gas stations, looting, mass looting, because I was unhappy on murder of one of my community members. Because so many of those shops belong to the same community members for whom we are protesting. So is it fair that I, as a protest, damage your barbershop, your grocery store, because I do not agree with what happened to George Floyd? It is absolutely not. Under no circumstances that violence can be condoned. And what's sad here is I have not, with exception of Barack Obama recently in the last few days, I have not seen any African American leader. It could be celebrity, it could be commerce, it could be entertainment, it could be sports, any leader from African American community come out and condemning the violence. Not the protests, but the violence. And I'm gonna name a few. It could be Oprah Winfrey. Come on, you've got to be one of the most influential women in the world, and you do not say a thing. Whoopi Goldberg, you say stuff on everything. You drop the mic in Correspondence Gala. You go everywhere, but you don't say a thing on this. Jay-Z, you're friends with Donald Trump. You're friends with the president. Come on, what are you waiting for? Beyonce, I mean, multi-platinum, multi-million-dollar star. You're not gonna say anything about the violence that people are just doing? And we've got Shaq. I mean, you built a business empire, man. What are you doing? LeBron James. I mean, you do such fantastic work with the kids up in the Midwest, with the schools and colleges that I've seen. I've not seen a word where you condemned the violence. Jennifer Hudson, Halle Berry, Ben Carson. I mean, come on, you ran for president, presidential nomination. I've not seen anything from you. Chris Rock, apparently he did say something. Ray Lewis, I mean, come on, one of the footballers that comes to mind. So I have not seen a statement condemning this violence across the country. I did see statements coming about the murder of George Floyd, which rightfully should be condemned. But equally, the act of this violence, these acts of violence should be condemned, because setting Target on fire, setting public property on fire, setting law enforcement vehicles on fire is not going to do anything. It is not going to correct anything. So now let me come to my next point. What has a chance of correcting something? That is that the communities across the country would have to self-reflect, would have to reflect within. And that comes from looking at the community, how the community engages with other communities, how South Asian communities engage with African American communities, how white communities engage with African communities or Southeast Asian communities. That is how different communities need to reflect on this. Plus, condemning the murder and the protests, and not the protest, actual violence. That is what needs to be done on all levels of our community, on a national scale, on a state level, on a regional level, on a city level. I've seen different protests where law enforcement officers knelt with the protesters. That is what leadership calls for. I've seen protests where law enforcement officers walked with the protesters. That is what defines good leadership. So different communities have to come together. And the very single most important aspect of this is we have to participate in local politics, regional politics, on grassroots level. We cannot just wait for every 4 years for the presidential election and then go out to cast vote, and that also just cast it across party lines. No, absolutely not. Because as soon as we start doing that, we are setting ourselves up for failure. How many times it happens that the victory margins have been decided by a mere fraction, or maybe 100, 200,000 votes? Well, last presidential election, what was the margin? The turnout defines success or defeat. So we have to start participating in our local elections. Look at your own community. Who are the leaders? Doesn't have to be the actual leaders of the community. Who are those individuals that command that individual presence? Who are worthy of leading the community into the next decade? We've got elections coming up in November. They're supposed to be in May. Now they're in November, and specifically talking about Frisco. So why not? Why not look at that? Dallas-Fort Worth, really. Why not look at those communities and start participating? Because there is absolutely no other way this judicial injustice will end unless and until we become part of the policy-making process, and that will only happen if we start voting at every single level of this political system. It may take a while, but it will happen. Because all other ways of justice, I've seen that last 10 years or so. That does not work. We protest for 2 weeks, 2 months, and then 6 months later, 8 months later, there's another individual who's being killed by the cops. Yes, it's going to keep happening. Not all cops are bad. There are some fantastic cops, but you've got to be able to become part of the system. So just a few things. If we're going to condemn the murder, we also have to condemn the violence that comes with these protests. The African American leadership that needs to come forward and in very strong words needs to condemn this violence. Otherwise, we're no better than that cop who just killed George Floyd. It's as simple as that. We've got to be able to take ownership of our communities. We've got to be able to start participating. We've got to be able to identify those individuals who can lead our communities into the next decade. So just a few things to reflect upon. I thought I'd just present this myself instead of just being a keyboard warrior. I'll just use my words and put my face out there. Questions, more than welcome to ask questions, more than welcome to comment, because we may disagree on a lot of things, but we all have the right to an opinion that we may disagree with in a very civil and objective manner. And that is what the Constitution of this country enables us to do. So let's become part of the constitutional process, and in due time, we shall see the change without violence, without setting fire to public property, without losing another George Floyd in the process. Think about it and have a good day.